prevents the disease.
Now, Junie says this is another major step in trying to protect the vaccinated from those who are not. Taliban is accusing the U.S. of violating last year's peace deal signed in Doha. It is calling on the Biden administration to immediately lift sanctions against senior members of the Taliban's new cabinet. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says the Taliban government has a ways to go.
One of the ways that the Taliban can demonstrate that they are serious about being a bona fide government and respected in an international community is to not allow that to happen.
Yeah, and he says it has to demonstrate it'll keep al-Qaeda from forming in the country. Japan now has formally extended the COVID state of emergency through the end of the month. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg. All right, Brian.
All right, Ed, thanks very much. The time, 38 minutes past the hour. Time for Global Sports. Well, we love our Cinderella runs, and we've got them at the U.S. Open. Let's get to Dan Schwartzman with more. Dan.
Brian, two Cinderella stories tonight. The women's semifinal matchups at the U.S. Open. Well, the first matchup, Leylah Fernandez leading two-seed Aryna Sabalenka 1-0. She won the first one 7-6. Right now in the second set, they are tied at 2 games apiece. Coming up after this one, it's the other Cinderella story. The 18-year-old qualifier Emma Raducanu. She will face 17-seeded Maria Sakkari. Again, Leylah Fernandez right now winning 1-0 over two-seeded Aryna Sabalenka. In soccer, AS in Spain reports that Real Madrid's making a plan to pursue both Kylian Mbappe and Erling Haaland next summer. But if Madrid strikes out in its pursuit of the Borussia Dortmund star, they will pivot and make a move for Bayern Munich's Robert Lewandowski. Reports say the 33-year-old Poland international is believed to want to move to Madrid next summer for a new challenge after dominating the Bundesliga for the past 12 years at Bayern and previously at Dortmund. The NFL season is underway. 8:20 to go in the first quarter. The Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys are scoreless. Currently, Dak Prescott back from injury. He's 3 of 6 for 49 yards passing. Amari Cooper 29 yards receiving. All-Pro pass rusher T.J. Watt and the Steelers agreeing to a contract extension, with Watt signing a 4-year, $112 million deal with $80 million of that guaranteed. Watt leading the league with sacks last season with 15. Well, the reports are true. The Baltimore Ravens will be without both cornerback Marcus Peters and running back Gus Edwards. Both have torn ACLs in practice earlier today. Edwards is the third running back to be lost for the year after J.K. Dobbins and Justice Hill. Major League Baseball scoreboard, local teams in action. Bottom of the 6, Mets 2, Miami 1. Bottom of the 6, Kansas City 1, Baltimore nothing. Top 6, Toronto leads the Yankees 2-0. Heading to the 5th, Washington and Atlanta tied at 2. I'm Dan Schwartzman. That's your Bloomberg World Sports Update. Kathleen.
Dan, thank you so very much. Well, coming up in the next segment of the show, we're going to be looking at Chinese ADRs slumping for a second day, Beijing taking aim at online game companies, and 2 Fed officials sell some actively traded securities to avoid even the mere hint there could be a conflict of interest. That's all coming up on Daybreak Asia. This is Bloomberg.
If knowledge is power, the Bloomberg Terminal is your power up, connecting you to real-time financial data, market-moving news, powerful analytics, and an influential network of financial decision makers around the world. Share ideas, negotiate trades, and gain the insight you need to make more informed decisions. See how the terminal can take your workflow to the next level at Bloomberg.com/professional.
Professional Liam Cohen, CPA, a trustee of the Jewish Communal Fund, and Sephardic Beaker Holem, talks about why he uses JCF's donor-advised fund and recommends JCF to his clients.
JCF is an organization that I've worked with for many years, both personally and in my accounting practice. The ease of giving and managing my donations through their website is very effective. Using it for tax planning and managing all of my charitable giving through one place. JCF's endowment helps support Jewish organizations throughout the tri-state area, and that's very important to me and my clients.
JCF's donor-advised fund is the smarter way to give back. Let Jewish Communal Fund maximize your clients' charitable deductions and streamline their charitable giving. Since JCF handles all the administration, get started now at jcfny.org or call 212-752-8277. We have a gift for giving.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, shares how we help you consider everything.
In today's ever-evolving environment, the team at Pershing's Prime Services wants to know, what are you focused on now? Are you confident in the stability of your counterparty? Do you feel they can help you grow your business? When it comes to fundraising, do you have access to the mindset of the advisor or have what you need to navigate the ODD process? Exceptional service for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. Whether it's customized financing or securities lending solutions, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your demands, so you can focus on growing your business and producing results for your clients.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC, member FINRA, NYSE SIPC.
What is dedication?
The thing that drives me every day as a dad is Dariana. We call him Day for short. Every day he's hungry for something, whether it's attention, affection, knowledge. And there's this huge responsibility in making sure that when he's no longer under my wing, that he's a good person. I think the advice I would give is you don't need to know all the answers. The craziest thing was believing that your dad knew everything. So as a dad, you felt like you had to know everything. You had to get everything right. It's okay to make mistakes. As long as it's coming from love, then, it kind of starts to work itself out. I want him to be able to sit back one day and go, we worked together, we did a good job.
That's dedication. Find out more at fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
When the market is unpredictable, BAM gives you certainty. In the face of market volatility and illiquidity, BAM insured municipal bonds deliver default protection, value preservation, and a durable AA rating from S&P. BAM's insurance protects against everything that causes a default, including natural disasters, financial fraud, pension issues, and economic disruption. So while America rebuilds, BAM has you covered. BAM. Build America Mutual. Talk to your investment advisor or visit buildamerica.com.
If you're having a business dispute, the process can be slow and drawn out, especially if you rely on litigation in the courts. You can wait for years before your case is resolved, and the longer your case proceeds, the more your case can cost. Not with the American Arbitration Association. Arbitration or mediation with the American Arbitration Association is faster. In fact, nearly 50% of our cases settle prior to hearings. ADR.org. Resolve faster.
BSO Now is your online home for brand new Boston Symphony Orchestra and Boston Pops performances. Discover new releases each week that include behind-the-scenes storytelling with conductors including music director Andres Nelsons, guest composers and musicians, plus critically acclaimed archival concerts and more. Visit bso.org/now, where the music plays on. BSO season sponsored by Bank of America.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia. It's 45 minutes past the hour. Time for a check of sports from around the world. Here's Dan Schwartzman.
Thanks, Doug. AS in Spain reports that Real Madrid is making plans to pursue both Kylian Mbappe and Erling Haaland next summer. But if Madrid strikes out in its pursuit of the Borussia Dortmund star, they will pivot and make a move for Bayern Munich's Robert Lewandowski. The 33-year-old Poland international is believed to want to move to Madrid next summer for a new challenge after dominating the Bundesliga the past 12 years at Bayern and previously at Dortmund. The U.S. Open women's semifinal matches are tonight as 19-year-old Leylah Fernandez faces 2-seed Aryna Sabalenka, while 17-seed Maria Sakkari takes on 18-year-old qualifier Emma Raducanu. The NFL season kicking off tonight as the defending Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers are hosting the Dallas Cowboys. 44-year-old Tom Brady beginning his 22nd year in the league, coming off winning his 7th Super Bowl. All-pro pass rusher T.J. Watt and the Pittsburgh Steelers agreeing to a contract extension, with Watt signing a 4-year, $112 million deal with $80 million of it guaranteed. The 26-year-old has been named the first-team All-Pro each of the last 2 seasons, and has been runner-up both years for NFL Defensive Player of the Year. Last season, Watt led the league with 15 sacks. ESPN reporting that the Baltimore Ravens think that both quarterback Marcus Peters and running back Gus Edwards could miss the entire season with torn ACL suffered in practice today. Edwards would be the third running back lost for the season due to injury following J.K. Dobbins and Justice Hill. I'm Dan Schwartzman, that's your Bloomberg World Sports Update.
Quick take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Real estate equity markets have been running at the top of the hour in Taiwan and Singapore, and then at the bottom of the coming hour, all eyes will be on Hong Kong, particularly technology shares playing in the online video gaming space. During the New York session, we had ADRs and Tencent down about 2.8%. NetEase slipped 2% today. This was after authorities in Beijing told both of those companies to end their sole focus on profit from online video gaming. Although, if you look at the NASDAQ Golden Dragon Index, we were only down 0.4% in New York. However, step back, look at the prior day and today, and we were weaker by nearly 4%. If you look at what's happening in Tokyo right now, we have a little bit of defensiveness in tone, although the market is trading higher. The Nikkei is up about 0.5%. Financials, information tech out in front. If you look at what's going on in Sydney, ASX 200 ahead by 0.5%. It's consumer discretionary along with material shares leading. Although in Seoul now, the Kospi trading weak by about 0.1%. Financials and consumer discretionary, interestingly, leading the decline. In terms of the bond market, 10-year Treasury right now in the Tokyo session with a yield of 1.30%. Crude oil continuing to trade lower. We were down about 1.7%. That's WTI in the New York session on word that China will, for the first time, release crude from state reserves as a way of alleviating pressure from rising prices. Remember yesterday we talked about factory gate inflation in China at a 13-year high. All right, that will do it for the moment. On market action, we'll talk again in about 15 minutes from now. Ed Baxter's got global news from San Francisco. Eddie.
I do. Thank you, Douglas. U.S. President Joe Biden has laid out a plan to make more than 80 million workers get vaccinated. Biden says his job is to protect Americans' health and the economy, and the non-vaxxers are hurting both. He says needs to protect those who have been vaccinated from those who have not, and he does say the Constitution gives him that power. Federal employees, mandatory vaccination, encouraging private sector to do the same. He says there will be economic help for small business. Also announcing a rapid expansion and getting in home testing into the communities. Super Typhoon Chanthu is threatening to flow through northern provinces of the Philippines as it intensifies at sea before heading to Taiwan. Second super typhoon of the season. Looks like it hit with the south of Taiwan and will go north of Hong Kong. Taliban is accusing the U.S. of violating last year's peace deal signed in Doha. It says it hasn't proven it is worthy of being trusted yet. Japan officially extending pandemic emergency measures. Over 5,000 bars, though, are opening, flouting the orders. And Singapore is shifting its focus of daily reports to turn to medical capacity amid an increase in its daily count of COVID cases, the highest it's ever seen. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg. All right, Brian.
All right, thanks very much, Ed. 10 minutes here before the top of the hour. Chinese ADRs, as you heard Doug talk about there, slumping for a second day. Tencent and NetEase in particular, they were summoned by Chinese regulators. And our guest for this next segment is Edwin Chan, Bloomberg's editor for China Tech. So, Edwin, they were told they need to break a solitary focus on profit. That's not quite all the way to you can't make profit. So we're talking about a range here. At the other end of the range, if you look at shareholder capitalism as a sort of gentle nudge that you should consider shareholders, customers, employees, and society. That's a gentle nudge from society on that. But this sounds like something a lot closer to, be careful, we don't want you making much profit.
That's exactly right. I think it's more of a gentle nudge. I mean, they're essentially warning them against the single-minded pursuit of profit or sacrificing societal welfare for profits. And I think what it did yesterday was it already, markets were already on edge. So what it did was it sort of pushed investors to reconsider Beijing's stance towards the giant gaming industry and spurred fears that more regulations may be on the way to curb gaming in general.
So the reason I said gentle nudge is that's what is happening in the West. You know, companies are sort of told by people in society that you should care about more than just your shareholders and making profits. This seems like it's almost all the way at the other end, as you just laid out. Now, the other aspect of this that's quite troubling in one sense is that we've had a number of Chinese officials come out recently, 2 vice premiers, and even the president himself, Xi Jinping, talking about how China still embraces capitalism, okay? But you're having almost on a daily basis these new aspects to the crackdown, which means that investors who had been buying back in on the positivity are now getting hurt.
Yes, exactly. China has made noises for many years about support for the private sector, but increasingly less so. And recently, as you point out, the gauge has kind of swiveled the other way almost. I mean, Liu He and Xi Jinping have been on record recently saying, you know, this is not an attack on the private sector. We still welcome private enterprise, and it's a pillar of the economy. And in fact, the digital economy, I think, has been estimated at 40% of China's GDP. But, you know, noises like this from gaming regulators and in numerous other sectors, from ride-hailing to e-commerce, they don't really give investors a lot of comfort, you know, in terms of the gauge, whether it's really pivoting towards a socialist economy.
So I guess one big question will be, will investors come back in once you see kind of more blood on the tracks?
Until very recently, I think an increasing number of investors have made exactly those same noises or expressed those sentiments. I think they said the worst may have been over. Morgan Stanley, I think, famously just 2 days ago was expressing that precise sentiment. I think there's still too much uncertainty to go all the way back in right now. A lot of other investors are preferring to wait on the sidelines to at least get some clarity on where we're going with all this.
Yep. All right, Edwin. Thank you very much for joining us again. Edwin Chen, Bloomberg's editor for China and Technology. Kathleen.
Well, let's move on to a big story. A lot of focus on the Federal Reserve, I suspect, not in a way that Fed officials were really looking for. The presidents of the Fed banks in Boston and Dallas will sell their individual stock holdings by September 30th. That's due to ethics concerns about their trading activity in the past year and their desire to avoid any implication that what they have done is beyond the ken, not something they should be doing. Joining us now to discuss is Katerina Saravia, Bloomberg's Dallas Bureau Chief. Katerina, it's great to have you with us. Rob Kaplan, Dallas Fed, Eric Rosenberg, Boston Fed. The story came out, what was it, I guess yesterday, the night before, about the stock trades and a pretty quick reaction. Remind us what they have been doing that's gotten the wrong kind of attention.
Yeah, hi Kathleen. So all the Fed presidents have to disclose their financial activity every year, and I think what from these particular presidents, what kind of raised some flags for folks was that there was active trading going on in the stock market in various different companies. And for Eric Rosenbrendt, the president of the Boston Fed, he was buying and selling some real estate investment funds. And of course, right now, the Fed is pretty heavily in the market through its treasury and mortgage-backed security purchases. And it obviously, in 2020 when this was happening, it was also supporting the markets in various other ways through its kind of pandemic emergency program.
Let's make it very clear to our listeners that they didn't do anything they weren't supposed to do. This has been fully disclosed. It's public disclosures, so what's next? They didn't break the law. They've been very transparent, and they're all saying, well, we don't even want to have the appearance of being unethical, so we're going to sell. What do you think happens next?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. This was cleared legally and ethically as well by the Fed's ethical code of conduct. So I think the kind of logical thing I wonder about next is whether we'll see a change to some of those rules. I think it depends on what entity kind of has the power to do that. We've heard some folks say that that is within the purview of the Yeah, in Congress, I mean, I'm not sure. I think kind of the, the Senate Banking Committee is a...
Elizabeth Warren? Sherrod
Brown? Right. I think absolutely. You would probably hear from some of those folks that tend to be a bit more critical of things like this. So, yeah, I think it'll be interesting. If we did see something from Congress, I think that would be, quite interesting.
And just really quickly, about 15, 20 seconds, Jay Powell, he didn't step over any of these lines?
No, not that we've seen. I think the last disclosure we had from him, things were pretty much in if I'm remembering correctly, blind trust, things like that. So not like the active trading we saw from these other two.
Very, very passive for sure. Thanks so much, Katerina Saravi has been covering this story for us. Keep watching because I don't think this story is done yet. She's Bloomberg's Dallas bureau chief. This is Daybreak Asia, another exciting hour coming up. This is Bloomberg.
If knowledge is power, the Bloomberg terminal is your power up, connecting you to real-time financial data, market-moving news, powerful analytics, and an influential network of financial decision makers around the world. Share ideas, negotiate trades, and gain the insight you need to make more informed decisions. See how the terminal can take your workflow to the next level at Bloomberg.com/professional.
This is the Bloomberg Green Business Report. Climate change is top of mind for some of the world's top religious leaders. For the first time ever, Pope Francis, the ecumenical patriarch Bartholomew, and the Archbishop of Canterbury issued a joint statement. It is intended to get notice ahead of the United Nations-led climate talks that will take place in Scotland in November. The three are calling for action to address climate change and social inequality. The religious leader's statement says, in part, we stand before a harsh justice. Biodiversity loss, environmental degradation, and climate change are the inevitable consequences of our actions. Today, we are paying the price. Tomorrow could be worse. Scientists agree. They say Earth has already warmed 1.1 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial times, and the planet is on track to get about 3 degrees hotter by the end of the century. That level of temperature increase would make extreme weather events more frequent and devastate ecosystems. Jeff Bellinger, Bloomberg Radio.
Where are today's real testing grounds for the latest innovation? Places where advancements in health, transportation, and business happen every day. Cities. Today, cities lead the way, taking local solves and turning them into global solutions. Now, introducing Bloomberg City Lab, a new platform covering the present and future of global cities. Learn more at Bloomberg.com/CityLab. Brought to you in partnership with Hyundai.
Broadcasting 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia for this Friday, September 10th in Hong Kong, Thursday, September 9th in New York. Coming up this hour.
Asian stocks rise as investors weigh virus challenges.
More American companies are expressing concern about the Delta variant.
Chinese ADRs slump as Beijing slows down the approval of online games.
Biden says patience is worn out with the unvaccinated, orders all federal branch workers to be vaccinated and for business to do the same. Over 5,000 Tokyo bars resisting the COVID restrictions. I'm Ed Baxter with Global News.
Will two teenagers be moving on to the women's final of the U.S. Open? I'm Dan Schwartzman. I'll have that story and more coming up in Bloomberg Sports.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Asia. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
And the password is vaccinated. It's 9 in the morning in Hong Kong. Equity markets will begin trading at the bottom of the hour. If you're joining from the region, good morning. I'm Doug Krisner at the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York.
And I'm Kathleen Hayes, and the answer is yes. I'm vaccinated. That's why I'm allowed to be in studio with Doug. Anyway, right here, Bloomberg World Headquarters. But let's start by saying Bloomberg Daybreak Asia is presented by Interactive Brokers Stock Yield Enhancement Program. Earn extra income on the fully paid shares of stock in your brokerage account. Open an Interactive Brokers account today and learn more at ibkr.com/SYEP. Now let's learn more about how things are shaping up in this Asian trading day, last day of the week with Bloomberg's Brian Curtis. Brian.
Kathleen, it just seems investors are in kind of a difficult area here where they are not quite sure about the process or the path of the Delta variant. They're not really quite sure about the impact on economic data. And of course, policy as it regards central bank action and policy as we've seen in China. And we had some new Chinese reassurances. The Chinese Vice Premier, Hu Junhua, has lauded foreign investment for technological innovation, and he is the latest government official seeking to reassure investors after the recent sell-off in China, who said China should encourage foreign businesses to increase investment in research and development. I think today will be a really interesting day, almost a telltale day, whether investors are willing to stay patient and accept these reassurances or whether or not they express some sort of fed-up nature. And we saw that with the selling in Tencent yesterday, down 8.5% and down another 2.8% in the ADRs in the United States. So it's an interesting day shaping up. Also, we had from regulators in Beijing, they've signed off on a China Evergrande Group proposal to renegotiate payment deadlines with the banks that it owes money to and with other creditors. And that sort of paves the way for a temporary reprieve, even though we saw the selling of the bonds quite aggressive yesterday, and the stock was down 11%. So let's watch and see what happens today. Dollar yen 109.71. We've got the yield on the 10-year at 1.29%, and a rally in Tokyo stocks. The Nikkei is up 0.25%. Doug T.
All right, Brian, thanks. Well, as you know, Chinese ADRs here in New York slumped for a second day. This as Beijing took aim at online game companies. Now, since Wednesday, Tencent and NetEase have lost about $60 billion in market value. This is in response, obviously, to Chinese regulators slowing down approval for all new online games. Now, South China Morning Post reported the news in an update to an earlier report saying there was a freeze on approvals. Not so. Wednesday, you might remember, Xinhua reported Chinese regulators instructed game company executives to break their solitary focus on making a profit. Well, Bloomberg's Tom Orlik tells us this is all part of Chinese President Xi Jinping's common prosperity push.
I think what we continue to find out is how broad that common prosperity agenda is. Less gaming time for kids, stricter controls on property speculators, essentially turning the entire private education sector into a non-profit sector. Where will they go next? And what are the implications of this sweeping crackdown on private sector entrepreneurs for China's long-term growth prospects?
So when it comes to online game companies, authorities have been waging a campaign essentially to curb addiction among minors. Last week, you might remember, government released new regulations limiting the amount of time children can play video games to just 3 hours a week.
Well, I would be easily contained to less than 3 hours a week at any rate, but I'm not 12 years old. More American companies, another big story, expressing concern about the Delta variant. Microsoft scrapping plans to fully reopen offices by October 4th, saying it can no longer give a date for returning to work because the pandemic is just too unpredictable. Microsoft saying it will communicate a 30-day transition period that provides plenty of time for employees to prepare for their return, a strategy similar to one adopted by its fellow tech giant Apple, which has delayed its own return to office plans multiple times. And American Express again delaying its plans for returning U.S. workers to the office. The new target is now January 24th at the earliest.
All right, we're at 5 minutes past the hour. Let's get updated on global news. We have President Biden here in the U.S. laying out plans to make more than 80 million workers get vaccinated. Ed Baxter covering it all from the Bloomberg 960 newsroom in San Francisco. Ed.
I heard a very wise man say recently the password is vaccinated.
That's right.
And it looks like that's where he's going. Biden says it is his job to protect all Americans' health. He says, what more is there to wait for? What more do you need to see?
We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin.
and the refusal has cost all of us.
Biden says it's not about freedoms, but about protecting public health and helping the economy. And so
I will sign an executive order that will now require all executive branch federal employees to be vaccinated. All.
And he says he's encouraging all private sector employers to do the same thing, to follow the lead. He says all healthcare workers will be vaccinated, and he says there will be help for small business.
We'll be expanding COVID-19 economic injury disaster loan programs. That's a program that's going to allow small businesses to borrow up to $2 million from the current $500,000 to keep going if COVID-19 impacts on their sales.
Now, Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove says the game plan here...
Get ahead of the ban. They want people to follow them and employers to follow suit and do this. Remember, what triggered a lot of this was that approval by the FDA of Pfizer's vaccine, that higher level than the emergency authorization that we've been using until then. So, they sort of have been leading the charge since then, encouraging people to go here.
Yeah, Josh says this puts more onus and support on employers. Los Angeles School District, meanwhile, the nation's second largest, will require COVID-19 vaccines for all eligible students. Japan is extending the emergency status through the end of the month. Bloomberg's Sophie Jackman also says hinting at vaccine passes.
Also hinted at Japan using vaccination certificates and test results in the future to try to alleviate some of these restrictions, and that would be music to the ears of business owners. It remains to be seen exactly how they'll do that.
Yeah, and Sophie says this, hints at shortening travel quarantines for the vaccinated as well. Now, some bars are bucking the extension. A Bloomberg survey shows more than 5,300 Tokyo bars already flouting the rules. And the Justice Department is suing Texas over the new abortion law. Attorney General Merrick Garland says the law is blatantly unconstitutional. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg. Doug.
Thank you, Ed. Let's get to our guest for the half hour. He is Ray Sharma-Ong, a multi-asset solutions investment director for the APAC region at Aberdeen Standard Investments. Ray is on the line from Singapore. Thanks for being with us, Ray. I think we got to begin with what's going on in China. The continuation of this crackdown that we have seen now for several months, it's clearly deepening. And now, in a meeting that some of the executives of these online video gaming companies had with authorities, I mean, the idea that you're going to basically remove the focus of profit, that being the motivating factor. I mean, how do you begin to get your arms around what's happening in China right now?
Thanks for having me. And yes, we do agree that the crackdown has been very, very harsh and very, very strong. How we've seen it is that within active management, we do see opportunities within China as well as the incentives to actually avoid those that are directly affected. So as you have mentioned, if you look at China from its peak, it sold off about 35%. We think it's almost at about its drop in terms of what's going to be fully priced in, perhaps another 5-10% more in that leg. But post that, we don't see any more further downside from there. Yes, regulation has been focused on data security, antitrust, financial markets, social aspects. But what we have done in our multi-asset portfolios is focus on areas that would be the beneficiaries, areas that will avoid the regulatory crackdown. As an example, we have a preference over China A shares over China H shares because for two key reasons. One, the A share market has low exposure to the regulated sectors, low exposure to tech, gaming, education. And second, with all the chatter around potential Chinese data slowing down, we expect fiscal and monetary support to come in, and we do see the A share market being beneficiaries of that.
So you sound very positive and very focused. You know what you want to buy and not buy. What do you tell people who say, other investment managers, if a country's going so anti-capitalist, you don't want to invest there?
Yes, that's true. So one thing to take note of is to actually identify which sector and which markets have more state-owned exposures and which have more private-owned exposures. And the way you would want to channel your investments would be those that have slightly lower privately owned exposures versus the state-owned exposures. A-share, as an example, the private-owned exposure is a lot lower than the H-share market, and the H-share market has large exposures to internet companies. So that's where we want to avoid right now in the current environment.
Ray, when we continue the conversation, I want to get your take on what's happening in Japan. I think that it's kind of interesting how the Nikkei has been performing relative to some of the other markets in the APAC region. And now there seems to be the added influence of a little bit of political uncertainty in Japan. I'd like to pick your brain on that thought. And also, if we can talk a little bit about the Fed. Plans for tapering. We heard from the ECB on Thursday in Frankfurt, and it looks like Madame Lagarde is going to begin that process gently, adjusting the pace. What are your expectations for central bank policy between now and the end of the year? Our guest is Ray Sharma Ong, Multi-Asset Solutions Investment Director at Aberdeen Standard Investments. We'll continue with Ray coming up. This is Bloomberg.
If knowledge is power, the Bloomberg Terminal is your power up, connecting you to the real-time financial news, data, and analytics that can take your workflow to the next level. Power up at Bloomberg.com/professional.
Managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically. Yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Greg Sauter is president of WGI, which provides engineering solutions for public infrastructure and real estate development projects. He's also on the board of overseers for New Jersey Institute of Technology and sees firsthand the intense demand by companies to hire NJIT graduates.
It's become almost cliche to say, but a large percentage of the jobs required in the not-too-distant future have not even been identified yet. What that means is we need graduates with problem-solving skills and an understanding of technology, technological dexterity, to be the leaders and innovators of the future. NJIT is rising to that challenge. It's not just about the engineering and the science, but it's also about the application of those in problem solving. Understanding how to apply is something that NJIT is outstanding at, and that's one of the reasons that their student body, that their graduates are sought after.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Burden LLP Accountants and Advisors presents Tax Chat with Mayor Mintz, partner and co-leader of Burden's real estate practice.
Whether it's because of the COVID-19 pandemic or not, it is essential for anyone negotiating a deal to understand the underlying economic assumptions and the current market. From buying or selling assets to forming a joint venture, it's important to work with a sophisticated tax advisor who understands how the changing tax law may impact the structure of the deal. At Burden, we leverage our more than 100 years of transactional experience to help guide clients through the complexities of these structures and ensure that they understand any potential tax impact. If you're a high net worth individual or business owner, let Burden help protect you, your family, and your business.
For more Tax Chat from Burden, visit BurdenLLP.com. That's BERDONLLP.com. Burden Accountants and Advisors. We listen, we solve, we do.
You know the expression, hit the ground running. We think it's a better idea to hit the ground listening. Karen Moscow.
The pandemic is having a major impact on the labor market.
Nathan Hager.
President Biden is setting a new goal.
Bloomberg Daybreak.
A landmark trial kicked off this week.
Weekday mornings at 5 Eastern.
We really haven't seen that kind of move happen.
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
How do you describe a business advisor relationship so unique that it inspires innovation for your growth and success? You don't. You experience it. At Witham, we think client-centrically, with you as the sole focus of our attention. As a forward-thinking, technology-driven advisory tax and accounting firm, we deliver innovative solutions and deep industry expertise. Experience the Witham way. Innovative, adaptive, effective, trusted. Witham. Visit Witham.com to learn more.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia. It's a quarter past the hour now. Time for a check of sport from around the world. Here's Dan Schwartzman.
Thanks, Brian. UEFA President Alexander Seferin says Europe could boycott future World Cups if FIFA decides to play the tournament every 2 years and not every 4 years as currently scheduled. Former Arsenal manager Arsene Wenger, who's leading a group looking at different options, believes a major tournament should be played every year. Seferin says that a World Cup every 2 years, along with the Olympics and other yearly major tournaments, would be too many matches in a year for players. The U.S. Open women's semifinal matches are ongoing tonight as 19-year-old Leylah Fernandez is taking on 2-seed Aryna Sabalenka, while 17-seed Maria Sakkari takes on 18-year-old qualifier Emma Raducanu. Both men's semifinals are scheduled for tomorrow, with top-seeded Novak Djokovic facing 4th-seed Alexander Zverev, while 12-seed Felix Auger-Aliassime takes on 2-seed Daniil Medvedev. The defending Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers are hosting the Dallas Cowboys tonight at Raymond James Stadium as the NFL season kicks off. ESPN reports that the Baltimore Ravens think that both cornerback Marcus Peters and running back Gus Edwards could miss the entire season with torn ACL suffered in practice today. Edwards would be the third running back to be lost for the season due to injury following J.K. Dobbins and Justice Hill. Finally, All-Pro pass rusher T.J. Watt and the Pittsburgh Steelers have agreed to a contract extension, with Watt signing a 4-year, $112 million deal with $80 million of it guaranteed. I'm Dan Schwartzman. That's your Bloomberg World Sports Update.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Hi, everybody. 17 minutes past the hour. We update markets every 15 minutes here on Bloomberg Radio. We're getting some indications that stocks like Tencent and NetEase will show some gains today. That after a newspaper clarified an earlier report that there would be a freeze on approvals for new games. The latest report had said from the South China Morning Post that there would be limits, and so we may see a little bit of a bounce today. We also had some new reassurances from Chinese leaders. Chinese Vice Premier Hu Junhua lauded foreign investment for technological innovation, the latest government official trying to reassure investors. So we'll see whether that feeds through. We do have Hang Seng Index futures now just starting to trade. They're up about 0.6%. Maybe a little relief after the torrid selling we saw yesterday. The Hang Seng Tech Index off 4.5%. The Hang Seng Index itself down 2.3%. So that is all coming. Also, Hong Kong regulators plan to curb access for retail investors to buy and trade blank check companies. Hong Kong authorities are preparing to roll out their framework this month for this part of the market. And sources are saying you have to be a so-called professional investor with assets of more than $1 million US. In currency trades, right now the Bloomberg dollar spot is stronger by 0.1%, coming in 109.73. Yield on the 10-year Treasury 1.29%. Markets elsewhere in the region are gaining. The Nikkei is up 0.25%. The ASX 200 is up 0.33%. And we also see the Taiwan and Singapore markets edging forward as well. And that's a look at markets. Ed Baxter with news in San Francisco. Ed?
All right, thank you, Brian. U.S. President Joe Biden has laid out a plan to make more than 80 million workers get vaccinated. Biden says his job is to protect Americans' health and the economy, and non-vaxxers are hurting both. He says this needs to protect those who have been vaccinated from those who have not. Federal employees mandatory vaccination, encouraging private sector to do the same. He says there will be economic help for small business. Also announcing a rapid expansion of getting at-home testing into the communities. Taliban is accusing the U.S. of violating last year's peace deal signed in Doha. U.S. says it hasn't proven it is worthy of being trusted yet. The Justice Department is suing Texas over the new abortion law. Attorney General Merrick Garland says the law is blatantly unconstitutional. With Japan officially extending pandemic emergency measures now, over 5,000 bars are openly flouting the orders themselves. And Singapore is shifting its focus of daily reports to turn to medical capacity amid an increase in its daily count of COVID cases, the highest it has ever seen. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg. Kathleen.
Ed, thanks so much. Let's get right back to Ray Sharma Ong. He's Multi-Asset Solutions Investment Director, Asia Pacific at Aberdeen Standard Investment. investments. So, Ray, I want to ask you, because to me right now what's interesting about China is it's pulling more and more towards we're the center of power. We don't have to look at the rest of the world and look for foreign capital, etc. But in Asia right now, and for investors globally, Fed tapering. We know they're going to do it, and they're probably going to start, if not September, very soon. Is that so priced in, or does it mean something globally for investors?
Sure, definitely. So, in our opinion, taper has been tapering is very well telegraphed. A lot of the uncertainty in our view has been priced in. A case in point is in June, at the June FOMC, the world went from no taper to the Fed indicating that they were going to taper. Post that, we saw that markets have been well behaved. Coming into what we're seeing in the past week or so, it is only natural for the markets to have some slight jitters as we approach the key event risk. But I think post that, markets will look through that and things will normalize. We do have a bullish case for equities to actually outperform once there's some policy clarity post taper announcements. We do see the Biden and the U.S. administration rolling in a spending bill they need to really work out by the end of this quarter. The COVID concerns right now in the U.S., yes, they are valid, but we do see once we go into the fourth quarter, we think the peak will be behind us, and that will allow some form of reopening, and data will normalize and data will improve. So we actually do have a bullish case right now, post the current uncertainty. But looking into the fourth quarter, we do expect things to be a lot more rosy.
It's going to be very interesting to see not just the plan for tapering, but at what point does the tapering conversation switch over to a conversation about tightening the Fed funds rate. But I want to pivot to Japan. We've seen a pretty decent market there so far this year in dollar terms. The Nikkei is up a little more than 3%. Give me your sense of what is happening in the overall economy in Japan. Bring into the conversation the political climate, and are you still bullish on Japanese equities?
Yes, the one-liner is I am bullish on Japanese equities, and here's why. So the first rally which we saw that happened over the past few weeks was on the back of the current incumbent, the Prime Minister Suga, indicating that he will step down at the upcoming elections in September. To me, it was a good and wise move for the party. His popularity rating has fallen way below the 30% mark. So doing this would actually help the party source for a leader that, in my opinion, which is what the party would do, a leader who is both popular with voters as well as with business leaders. We think that is key if the LDP would like to maintain power going to the November elections. So that would be the strategy which we think they will likely employ. So in my opinion, I think there is a second leg up for the Japanese market. A slight pause given how hard it's run, but a second leg up, and this is on the back of the following four factors. One, political clarity, means say we have a popular leader. Mm-hmm. Second, they will likely discuss and start initiating a fiscal package that will support the government. Japanese valuations, in our opinion, right now versus the rest of Asia, rest of the world, not stretched. And the event of tapering, in our opinion, would push global yields, especially if you focus on U.S. yields, perhaps up to 1.5%. That is going to be beneficial for value stocks, and Japan has a very deep value play with lots of financials we think that will do well too. So upwards for Japanese markets into the fourth quarter.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Ray Sharma-Ong, from China to Fed tapering to Japan. Looks like a good buying opportunity. He's Multi-Asset Solutions Investment Director for Asia Pacific at Aberdeen Standard Investments.
We got about 20 seconds, but I just want to pick your brain. Is this a significant development? Two Fed presidents basically changing their investment holdings. This is Kaplan, Rosengren. Big deal?
At a time when the Fed's under fire for a lot of stuff, I don't think it's a positive thing. They didn't do anything wrong, but that doesn't necessarily make a difference. Congress is going to be all over this. Keep it right here. A lot more coming up on Daybreak Asia. This is Bloomberg.
If knowledge is power, the Bloomberg Terminal is your power up, connecting you to the real-time financial news, data, and analytics that can take your workflow to the next level. Power up at Bloomberg.com/professional.
With the Bloomberg Small Business Report, I'm John Tucker. Former hedge fund manager Spencer Patton has carved out a niche doling out advice to entrepreneurs looking to make it big as contractors for FedEx Ground, the package delivery service that's been booming amid a surge in online shopping. Patton advises mom-and-pop operations about contracts that give the owners the right to operate FedEx ground routes in specified areas for as long as 3 years. The owners collect a fee for each package their fleet drops off, but they're entirely responsible for hiring drivers, buying trucks, and dealing with all the issues that come with running a small business. Patton says prices for these routes have increased 50% from only a few years ago, but they still may bring returns of more than 20% a year. Currently, FedEx Ground operates on short-term contracts with 5,600 small companies. That's the Bloomberg Small Business Report. I'm John Tucker.
Hey, Dad, your prescription will be ready in just a minute. Hey, Dad, your laundry will be ready in just a minute. Dad, your lunch will be ready in just a minute.
Hey, honey, why don't you take a minute? When you help care for a loved one, you give them as much time as you can, making sure they're safe and comfortable. But it's just as important that you take some time for yourself. At AARP, we can help with information and useful tips on how you can maintain a healthy life balance, care for your own physical and mental well-being, and manage the challenges of caring for a loved one. Because the better care you take of yourself, the better care you can provide for your loved one.
Thanks, Dad.
Thank you. You're there for them. We're here for you. Find free care guides to support you and your loved one at aarp.org/caregiving. That's aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
For the Jewish Communal Fund, Barbara Novick, investment professional and philanthropist.
I think JCF has one of the best funds out there. It's very reasonable in its pricing, it's very flexible in its investments, and I give them an A+ for client service.
A fund may be opened with a $5,000 contribution of cash or appreciated securities and can be used as an alternative to a private foundation. At any time, you may suggest which charities you would like to support and in what amounts. Choose from the menu of high-rated investment options, and your charitable fund can earn tax-free income.
It's a very client-centric organization. They have a very user-friendly website, and I find they make my life easier.
Let the Jewish Communal Fund be your personal connection to charitable giving. Open a JCF fund now to lock in this year's tax deduction. Call 212-752-8277, 212-752-8277, or visit jcfny.org.
What's the true value of your custodial relationship? Ben Harrison of BNY Mellon's Pershing explains.
As sophisticated investors demand more from their advisors, advisory firms, in turn, need to rely on their custodian to help them grow their complex businesses. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, supporting the rapid growth of RIAs is our #1 priority. We understand what it means to deliver true value to our clients who are looking for a custodian that is aligned with their best interest and delivers high-value solutions, all in an open architecture environment with flexibility, choice, and transparency. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength, resiliency, and high-touch service that BNY Mellon Pershing provides. When you work with Pershing, we put your business first. Can your custodian say that?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Pershing Advisor Solutions, LLC. Member FINRA SIPC.
Before and after the pandemic.
Is it driven by politics or by science?
That may be how we keep track of our lives from here on out.
What do you think the political effects of that impatience will be?
And through it all, there's been Bloomberg.
We begin on Capitol Hill.
The most accurate business world and healthcare news before and after.
The fundamentals do not justify this price action.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. When Paul Sweeney and Matt Miller bring you the day's market news.
How do you think investors should view Bitcoin?
You can count on some frivolity.
They've never taken up the Disney, so just failure on so many. Why this performance?
Bloomberg Markets, extensive, essential, and endlessly entertaining.
I'm not a pet person. I'm a financial analyst. By the way, someone writes in and says, I didn't realize Paul hated American values.
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg 960 to the country, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
It's 9:30 a.m. in Hong Kong. I'm Kathleen
Risner. We're coming to you from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York, where it is now 9:30 Wall Street time. We've got action underway in Hong Kong and on the Chinese mainland. Right out of the gate, Hang Seng is up about 0.7%. 10 of the industry groups within the Hang Seng are positive, only one negative, that being the Information Technology Index. We'll take a closer look at market action. Brian Curtis joins us momentarily. Right now, a few of this hour's top business stories.
Another very big one out of China. Vice Premier Hu Jintao says China should encourage foreign businesses to increase investment in technology research and development. He told this to a work conference in Xiamen City in the Fujian province. This was reported by Xinhua. The comments seek to reassure investors after a months-long government clampdown that has sent Chinese tech stocks spiraling. The Hang Seng Tech Index, which tracks the biggest technology companies in China, has dropped about 40%. Not fun for investors. Since Wednesday, Tencent and NetEase have shed more than $60 billion in value, and that's after Chinese regulators warned industry executives to break their solitary focus on making a profit.
Well, China has made an unprecedented intervention in the global oil market. China is releasing crude from its strategic reserves. This is for the very first time, and the aim here is to lower prices. Here's Bloomberg's Stephen Engel.
Obviously, like many central banks, the authorities in China are very concerned by inflation. And what we saw with the factory gate inflation, PPI, in China in August up to a 13-year high of 9.5%. There is growing inflation in China.
Now, China has been selling other commodities from strategic reserves. This would include copper, aluminum, and some grains even. In the past, Beijing rarely confirmed these releases. However, the public release on the crude oil liquidation has been seen by many as an attempt to maximize the impact of this move.
American firms in China are hoping for a meeting between Presidents Joe Biden and Xi Jinping this year, according to an American Chamber of Commerce survey done in China. More than 60% of the members surveyed cited the need to restore regular visa services for business executives and their families. Another 47% wanted the removal of tariffs. More than three-quarters of companies complained that measures levied during the trade war were impacting their operations. Still, the results suggested that companies realized it's necessary to first improve U.S.-China relations. 54% of respondents surveyed called for, quote, regularized government-to-government communication to rebuild relations. However, the prospects for a face-to-face meeting between the two leaders look uncertain. Xi Jinping hasn't traveled outside of China in about 600 days as Beijing maintains strict controls against the pandemic.
All right, the China Open is upon us. Let's get to Hong Kong for a look at the price action. Brian Curtis is there. So every group within the Hang Seng is now pushing higher.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a relief rally. I mean, everything was hit so hard yesterday, and a lot of that was these comments about how the profit motive was being removed from companies. And the South China Morning Post had reported that the approval of new online games was halted completely. It later corrected the story to say that it was just a slowdown in approvals, and so investors are kind of buying back into that, although we should mention Tencent, even with its gain of 2.25%, that's only about a quarter of the 8.5% that it fell yesterday. NetEase is rebounding this morning, 3.5% or so. So there are a lot of green numbers here on the screen. So most of the markets are higher now. The Nikkei is up 0.4%. The ASX 200 is up about 0.25%. Even Taiwan and Singapore, they are putting on gains. The TAIEX up 18 points, 0.1%. The Straits Times Index up about 0.2%. Now, in terms of the China markets, it's a little bit more flat there, with the CSI 300 just up 1 point for this session. We had a couple of other stories. Hong Kong regulators planning to curb access for retail investors to buy and trade SPACs. They are getting ready to approve some sort of framework for these blank check companies, but sources say you'll have to have assets of more than $1 million US. And you just reported on those reassuring comments from the Chinese Vice Premier Hu Jintao. We'll see whether that sticks, because we've seen a number of reassurances from Chinese officials, only to find a new layer of the crackdown perhaps later that day or the next day. Dollar yen 109.74, yield on the 10-year 1.29%. WTI crude is trading a little bit lower, but not so much, even with the release of those reserve barrels of oil in China. WTI now 16.04 a barrel. Kathleen.
Well, let's go take a look at global news. A big theme around the world is how much can governments force people to get vaccinated? Joe Biden's taking some steps, it looks like that. So now we're going to go back to Ed Baxter in our San Francisco 960 newsroom. Ed.
Yeah, thank you. Rather than force, they prefer to say mandate, Kathleen. But
oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I know. President Biden says patience is worn thin, and those unvaccinated are threatening the health of the country and economic prosperity.
The unvaccinated overcrowd our hospitals, are overrunning emergency rooms and intensive care units, leaving no room for someone with a heart attack or pancreatitis or cancer.
Yeah, he's ordered federal government workers to get vaccinated.
I've signed another executive order that will require federal contractors to do the same. If you want to work with the federal government and do business with us, get vaccinated.
And the president says he is going after states and local officials who stand in the way of vaccination and masking mandates.
Right now, local school officials are trying to keep children safe in a pandemic while their governor picks a fight with them and even threatens their salaries or their jobs. Talk about bullying in schools.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the Los Angeles School District, the nation's second largest, will require COVID-19 vaccines for all eligible students. Now, Bloomberg's Jeannie Shanzano says there are some questions about how this gets done or whether there are even any exemptions.
And my understanding is it is a mandate for vaccinations for federal workers and contractors. And he was trying to move away from this either, carrot or stick of the testing. But then he did mention the testing as well. So this is one of the issues that, people have raised because vaccination really addresses and prevents the disease.
Jeannie says this is another major step in trying to protect the vaccinated from those who are not. Taliban accusing the U.S. of violating last year's peace deal signed in Doha, calling on the Biden administration to immediately lift sanctions against senior members of the Taliban's new cabinet. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says the Taliban government has a way to go for trust.
One of the ways that the Taliban can demonstrate that they are serious about being a bona fide government and respected in an